Welcome to the Now You're Playing With podcast Console Launch Special Part 2. We are continuing the retrospective of console launches, and in this episode we start to get heated as our opinions start splitting down the, surprise, Sega and Nintendo lines. Join Chris, Becky, Steve, and I as we jump back in time over 20 years and rekindle some old console wars.
Now You're Playing With podcast.
Alright, welcome to Part 2 of the video game launch discussions. We are picking up where we left off from Part 1, and we are at the NES.
We are on Generation 4 in my book, although 3 in Wikipedia's book. So
Generation 1
we'll go all Squaresoft on this, you know.
Generation Nintendo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Generation NES.
And actually, since we're a new episode, I'm Tatton.
Chris.
Steve. Oh, we're going a different direction, sorry. I'm Steve.
I'm Becky.
I'm Chris. And I get to do the NES, and I did not pick the NES, so this should be an interesting...
He doesn't
You don't even like
the
the NES.
I like the NES, I just don't love it the same way I do other things.
You just can't appreciate the fact that video game didn't happen before 1985.
You know, I actually like redheads instead of blondes, you know? That's nothing wrong with that. So here's the thing with what Tan was referring to in the first part was finding information on the NES test market in New York in 1985. Not even Nintendo currently really knows their shit. The biggest controversy is whether or not Super Mario Brothers was available in the test market. There's a fantastic article which we'll post a link to where a gentleman was digging through every source that he could. He found some old newspaper articles written at the time about the NES coming out. He contacted Nintendo personally. He got some first-hand accounts from people that worked at Nintendo at the time, and nobody had any paper evidence of Super Mario Brothers being a part of the test launch in 1985. The Super Mario Brothers was developed in 1985 and released in Japan in 1985 late. So it would make sense if it were that big of a hit of a game to not be available for a test market and to save it for a wide launch in 86. Now, as a part of the wide launch in 86, Super Mario Brothers was the reason to get a Nintendo Entertainment System, and that's what shot it into the stratosphere almost right away. That was the game that made it huge versus anything else in the market at that time. The Sega Master System, the 7800. But let's look at the rest of the lineup. Here's another thing. Nobody knows for sure exactly what was available on this launch lineup. So the definitive games seem to be the two pack-ins, Gyromite and Duck Hunt. Then we have Stack Up, Wild Gunman, Hogan's Alley, Baseball, Golf, Tennis, 10-Yard Fight, Excite Bike, Wrecking Crew, Kung Fu, Ice Climber, Clue Clue Land, Pinball. And then there are question marks on Super Mario Brothers, obviously, and then also Soccer, Donkey Kong Jr. Math, and Mock Rider. None of these games, and now everybody's going to disagree with me here, but other than Super Mario Brothers, nothing on that is so blow me away awesome today or even back then. Clue Clue Land, I mean, that's just like sluggishly controlling arcade port. I mean, it didn't seem like it'd be. You could play Clue Clue Land on an Atari.
I also think the controls really kill that game too. Like,
yeah, they're very sluggish.
It just doesn't make much sense, and you die cheaply a lot in that one.
When did Popeye release?
86. I've got an 86 release here. 1986 titles. These are based off rfgeneration.com, so I think these are based off of copyrights in the box rather than actual release dates, but I think it's fairly accurate because it's the rest of the black box games. You got Balloon Fight, Donkey Kong 1, 2, and 3, Gumshoe, Mario Brothers, Popeye, Urban Champion, and then your first handful of third-party games, most notable Ghosts and Goblins and Gradius. But those are 86, so they were probably available by the Christmas of 86 when Nintendo was first available nationwide, because it was kind of they started one test market, then two test markets, then they went up to 12 test markets, and it was finally released in that fall, I believe, for 86 nationwide. But again, you get rid of Super Mario Brothers. The only other thing that was cool at the time was the light gun, Duck Hunt, which was a cool arcade game at the time. And light guns were even though there have been light guns with some Pong consoles, this was like the first one where we were actually shooting real things instead of squares. One other little note: another thing we don't know is the price of the system. We're reading Phoenix right here.
So yeah, Phoenix, the Rise and Fall of Video Games by Leonard Herman, and this is the 3rd edition. I quote on page 108, for $159, the console would come with 2 controllers, the Zapper light gun, the game Duck Hunt, Rob, and a game called Gyromite that used gyroscopes and Rob.
We've got $159. We've got on Wikipedia a $299 for the test market. And then we've got on Wikipedia $249, and then we've got a $199 for the control deck. So all those are more expensive than the $159 for the deluxe set. I know. I'll just say $249 in $1985 is $522.12 in 2012 dollars. So a pretty big investment, but that's 2 controllers, a light gun, a Rob, and 2 games. So that's a pretty packed set, even though the games aren't that great. And the Super Mario Brothers set, the control deck, was the bigger seller or the more popular package, and that kind of led to the action set in 1988 or 87. The action set was the with the combo Mario Brothers Duck Hunt cart that most people are familiar with. That was the definitive Nintendo set when it was gaining in popularity, and I believe that one was. I don't even have a price on that. I think that one. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but
Maybe 200, 199.
Is it 199 or 149? I'm not sure.
I think it dropped to 149 after a while.
Well, there was also at the same time the control deck that only came with Mario that didn't have.
That was right. There was the control deck with Mario. It was $199 at first, according to this, and then later on they had. When they did the action set with the combo cart, they had a control deck with nothing, and that was $99. So it's maybe $149 would sound about right then. But anyway, I think all of us can agree we're disappointed in the fact that Nintendo is a company that's still around today, and they don't even know their own history this well.
Which is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous that there isn't a better documented history of this stuff.
And
it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know how it happened.
This is like this is sort of like, not documenting history, and this is a big, this is kind of a big part of history. So not having this, the Nintendo's claim to fame in the States beyond, the popularity of Donkey Kong the arcade machine really began with the NES, and it raised a generation. It's shocking that there's not enough respect for that past that we don't know.
Now Nintendo of America was a fledgling company at that point. They did try to get Atari to distribute a different version of the Famicom in America. I forget what it was called, but it was this futuristic computer-looking thing, and then they repackaged it into the NES.
Yeah, the NAS or NEA.
Yeah, they tried to get Atari on board with it, and Atari turned them down. But Atari was having their own problems. But that's a whole different podcast. But I mean, I can see why a small company like this wouldn't be so keen on having historical records for everything. And this was pre-internet times when, having this degree of history isn't, as important. But, with internet and podcasting and people trying to find this stuff out, you'd think somebody'd come forward with these stories, and it's just not happening with the Nintendo of America people.
At the same time, I have to wonder if it's a cultural thing. Like, I wonder if there was something that small that started in Japan, if that would be, completely documented. I mean, looking at all of the really awesome history books that we have, in print form from Japan that, has no equal rival over here in the States.
Well, other than the head, which I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was the son-in-law of the head of Nintendo of Japan who came over to run Nintendo of America. It was mostly American employees that ran Nintendo of America at that point.
Yeah, I mean, they were probably just interested in getting their product out, getting money coming in. They probably didn't care about
the test
what
market
they were
was
doing.
a big gamble too, because they had the guarantee that they would buy back any unsold consoles, and video games were declared dead. Toys R Us took out video games from their commercial song, from their jingle.
I want to grow up.
Yeah,
and play
also,
video games now.
Yeah,
throughout the Nintendo, up until maybe, early mid-90s, there weren't any launch dates for things.
Generally. No, it was gradual.
Nobody knows the launch dates for Zelda 2. I mean, things like that.
Right.
We don't know when exactly. You just kind of, and we knew this
The
growing up. It is filtered into the
the distribution networks weren't what they were today. There was no computers, or there were very few computers.
It's available when it shows up in the store.
Yeah.
Right.
Which could have been months after other places. Yeah.
So I'm kind of shocked that there's nobody, no collectors at the time. Like I don't know. Once upon a time, Star Wars action figures were really big, and I'm shocked that we have yak faces. We have these rare action figures because there are people that bought them and they were collectors at the time. I'm shocked that there are no collectors that are like, I was there day one and I bought this.
FAO Schwartz.
Video games were for kids, and the thought was that computers were taking over. Even then, Commodore 64 was at its peak at this point.
All right, let's ask Reddit then. Reddit's going to be able to answer it for us.
Whatever.
And even then, my guess is that over the years, the people who did collect at that level were the people who kept all their boxes and everything, but then kept all the receipts in the boxes, and the number of times that those have all changed hands and the amount of value that people hold and the receipt being there or not, a dated ticker tape would be an excellent source of this was when it came out. But, if you've got a game that's, like 30 years old.
And would receipts even have Super Mario Brothers written on the receipt? Would just say
Which is
video
true.
game.
Yeah, it would just say video game. But if you had like the receipt in the box, then that's, somewhat, I wouldn't say definitive proof, but I think it would be a very safe assumption that
it was Super Mario Brothers? That was packaged separately at that point?
Well,
you could look at the provenance though, like if it was someone that bought it then and still owns it.
If you bought it in if you
can
bought
talk
it
about
in New
buying it,
York,
I don't know.
like I would love to find somebody who bought, one of the launch systems. I mean, there were people that bought the launch systems. Love to see if the internet can dredge one of them up and say, so what'd you buy that day?
I mean, if they were able to come up with a third or a half of the people that have Nintendo World Championship carts and find out where all these stadium events are, I mean, there's a lot of people on the internet working for this stuff, and the fact that this hasn't been discovered after 15 years of internetness.
But the thing is how do you validate it? How do you validate? Because it's not like we can't find the information. It's that there's a ridiculous amount of incorrect information. So everybody has different stories. Everybody has a different take on it.
Yeah, we can't even get a launch price.
Yeah, I mean it's not that like nobody knows. It's that nobody knows what's right, and and therein lies the problem.
Well, the Nintendo Entertainment System in the Game Informer article gets an A for its launch grade, and I will agree because it it now mind you, it did not it was big, it was a good seller, but it took a year to take off nationwide, and then the NES started off pretty big and then got huge starting in about 88, 87 with the action set, and then it finally peaked in 1990 with Mario 3. So this wasn't like a mega hit out the door. Everybody had one right away. It was like the one cool kid had it, and then a couple people had it, and then a few more people had it. Then finally everybody had it, but not for a few more years. But that said, I would agree with the A grade, but I would say that you take away Super Mario Brothers, that launch lineup of black box games ain't that great. There's some stuff I like. I like Duck Hunt. I like Kung Fu, but
Excite Bike.
I like Excite Bike.
In June 1986, Nintendo offered a new, less expensive way to purchase the NES for those who lived in an area where it was available. The new $99.95 package contained only the NES control deck with 2 controllers and a Super Mario Bros. Game cartridge. The light gun, the robot, and their respective cartridges were available separately. No matter how Nintendo packaged the NES, it sold like hotcakes. By June, the company had sold 20,000 consoles in the U.S. So this was 1986. They sold 20,000 consoles.
Right. I mean, it's
According to Phoenix.
but those numbers with the $99, that doesn't sound right. That sounds really, really super cheap. Because I mean, I don't trust that number, so then
but at the same time it kind of almost makes sense, because if you come out of the gate, how much
and you're also,
Sony was losing money every single PS3 and they were selling. It was more expensive for them to produce it. If Nintendo starts out the gate and they're not making the money on the consoles but they're making the money on the games, it would be an intelligent.
for a small company like that, they didn't have the backbone to do that. They didn't have.
No.
They weren't a media company.
And it was too big of a gamble too, because I mean, video games were dead at the time.
Right.
But back to the launch lineup of games. Is anything in that black box series from 1985, that test market list? You can't even include the Donkey Kongs and that stuff.
Excite Bike. You are denying the love people have for Excite Bike.
I think Excite Bike's a second tier game at best.
Really?
I didn't buy it in NES to buy. Excite, ooh, this is cool too. Not, wow, this is cool. This is Super Mario Brothers. It's not Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, you've got to look at what was out at the time. So even though it wasn't Super Mario Brothers, you're competing with the tail end of the 7800, like the Atari generation, the Coleco arcade games. That launch lineup, even though they don't really hold a candle to the games that came out on the NES, are very good arcade games compared to what was out like ColecoVision and stuff at the time. I think they're like the blockbuster of Mario Brothers hadn't been set yet. Like that bar wasn't there yet. So comparatively, I don't think that launch group was bad. I actually think it was really good.
And it's not repeats of the same things that have been ported to every other system at the time too.
Well, it was half sports games.
Well, yeah, but wasn't the Intellivision half sports games too?
Right. That's what I'm saying.
You've got to do some level of, catering to the everybody else.
And shitty sports games on top of that. I honestly find a lot of the Intellivision.
Why did you get the NES?
Because I hate you. I honestly wanted a Sega Master System back at the day because my cousin had one, and I wanted to be. I had an Intellivision, and I was already that guy that had the different system than all the Ataris, so I didn't mind being that guy. It's fine.
It's fine.
That guy having the different system with the Master System. Now, Excite Bike. When was Excite Bike's first sequel?
Nintendo 64.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, but I mean, when was
15 years later after the fact?
Well, I guess Kid Icarus had a sequel on the
Game
Boy. Yeah,
that was later game anyway. But that launch lineup minus Super Mario Brothers is a C for me. Just go back to the grades. I said I wasn't going to make grades on this stuff, but,
except for the
so okay.
But Mario Brothers by itself, absolutely A. And
Cell systems.
Yes, that's what sold systems. Duck Hunt was my second choice.
Well, let's just pretend Super Mario Brothers is in there, and we'll all say.
Oh yeah,
A.
A is right.
Well, but I mean, the thing is even without Super Mario Brothers, assuming Super Mario Brothers wasn't in the launch lineup, it still was enough to get the system the backing that it needed to continue to get it out, to revive and
it was
blow.
packaged with Rob.
I think
the
Rob was actually the
into an
focus.
industry that was dead. I mean,
Rob was the focus at the time. Like there's an article in that article they were talking about like a party they had after the launch, and it was featuring like a giant ice sculpture of Rob or some sort of Rob in something. he was the focus, and even in all the NES posters, there's a big Rob in the background in purple light.
It was marketed as the Nintendo Entertainment System. It wasn't a video game. It was marketed as a toy.
Right.
Therefore, it was able to get its way in. And Stephen has a really good point. It had a great controller.
And we've been talking about how bad the controllers are for a lot of the systems so far. So
you didn't have the awkward side buttons. You didn't have the weird joysticks. You actually had a very playable controller. And when
the controller that's been copied since then, the controller we use today,
you get two.
They reinvented everything so much that controller is still standard. And I mean, like I said, the Rob and the light gun were what made it look not like a video game system, and the cartridges look like VHS tapes.
Yeah, I mean that's why they made it,
pushing it down.
That's why they made it so much bigger than the Famicom, just to make it look more like a VCR, and that's also was its downfall a couple of years later when everybody started breaking because you had to push on the pins with your cartridge, but nobody knew that then. It worked perfectly. So,
but absolutely an A, and it's the one or two greatest systems of all time, but most of that is due to Super Mario Brothers, which stupidly we have no idea when that actually came out in the United States, even 20 years, some years later. Now, the next one, or
yeah, sure.
The Sega Master System.
Excellent.
You know what I wonder, just on a weird off chance, some of the games printed the release year on the cartridge itself. I wonder if people have been like popping the cartridges open to see if there's a year on the actual PCB itself.
But were they using Japanese? No, they wouldn't have used Japanese because they had the 60, we had the 72s.
Yeah.
They did that
Would
for
be a
like the
variation.
gyromites, the few of the gyromites and stack ups and whatnot.
Yeah, but they didn't do it with the Super Mario Brothers.
No.
Have we solved the mystery?
No,
Maybe we
but
solved the mystery.
We need to see if
We'll
we
have to
can
look.
get. Well, it would be a 5-screw. It would be a 5-screw copies of Super Mario Brothers.
But then again, there could be 100 of
Manufacture
those.
date versus
And-
release date. That's also, if they're manufactured in Japan, it would take at least a month of transit. So in 1985 could still get here in early 86.
Something to think about. Anyway, SMS.
Okay, Sega Master System, again, cannot find an exact date. I found both June and October of 1986. The system was actually released as the Sega system. It was originally called that, but it was sold as the Sega base system that came with 2-pack-in, well, 1-pack, 2-pack-in.
One cart,
One
two
cart,
days.
2-pack-in. Hang On and Astro Warrior for $199.99. And then there was a bundle called the Sega Master System, and it came with Hang On, Safari Gun, Hunt, and a light gun. I can't find a price on that one, so not sure on what that was priced as. It was its slogan was "Now there are no limits."
I don't think they wanted it to be said that way.
Look how cute you were. Not
No,
knowing your
there are
limits.
no limit. No, that
There
was
we
the
go. There we
90s.
go.
Damn it! This was the 80s,
yeah.
so you can have this little sweeter.
They've been like bubblegum pop.
Let's see. It did so. It sold 125,000 systems in the first 4 months, but in the same period, the NES would sell 2 million. So it didn't do what. It didn't even do close to what Nintendo had. Nintendo had really a stranglehold on the market, and in the stateside, it's not that it was a bad system, but it wasn't exactly really a great system when it launched here, and in Japan it didn't do well either. It went against the MSX and the Famicom, so you really have two heavy hitters there, and so it didn't do well there. However, Europe. Nintendo didn't have a stranglehold. It wasn't as popular as the Atari ST and the Amiga, but it definitely outsold the NES.
It was the best console over in Europe.
Right. It sold 6.8 million units in Western Europe from 1991 and 1993.
Aren't they still making games in Europe for it as of like last week?
Brazil.
The last licensed game in Europe was Smurfs Travel the World in 1996. So yeah,
Nice.
they lasted a good long time. Brazil, it is huge in Brazil. It actually outsold the Sega Genesis. The company Tectoy is still making versions of the Master System now.
They're like plug and plays. They're like 50 in
but
one.
they stopped making ones with cartridge slots in 2006. Yeah, so I mean, seriously, they're huge deal. They've translated a lot of the Master System games over to Brazilian Portuguese. There are Brazilian games exclusive to the Brazilian Master System. Like they have their own games.
I wonder what awesome games we are missing.
Licensed copy of Street Fighter 2 for the Master System. Licensed.
Wow. Did that
Yeah.
even hit the Game Gear?
I don't think so.
It didn't,
no.
did it?
No. Mortal Kombat did. One other little thing with Japan. This was their second system in Japan. The SG-1000 came out almost the same time as the Famicom and fell behind the Famicom. And to fight Nintendo, they had a more powerful system, which ended up being they call it the Mark III over there. We got the Mark III called the Master System over here, eventually called the Master System. Just the Sega system, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But, like, so what were the The launch title's over here.
That was it.
Oh,
Honestly,
there's a secret launch title.
There is.
The Maze.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
the Snail Maze, which is built
Yes.
into the console. If you start up the system without the cart and without a cart in it, and hold 1 and 2, it goes into Snail Maze.
So the pack-in cart was the only thing available at launch day?
On launch day, the only things were available were Hang On, and the Astro Warrior, or Hang On and the Light Gun. And Hang On was by Yu Suzuki.
Hang On's awesome.
So
And Safari Hunt's really good too, way better than Duck Hunt if you've played it. It's got a
yeah,
great,
it's got the varieties of levels.
it's got a cool little hip hop beat when you turn on the system. I'd be playing it right now if I could, but I'll just do my horrible mouth beatbox. Let me see if I can get up an RF gen list here of early games for the system, because I don't.
So Alex Kidd. But
Yeah.
when you take Alex Kidd and you put Alex Kidd against Super Mario Brothers, Alex Kidd. So I'm going to say that Alex Kidd's a lot cuter.
More colorful,
Yeah.
more variety of the levels. Controls were a little sloppier.
Yeah. Well, and there was no pause on.
Yes, there was. There was pause on the system. You had to get into a menu
system,
to use your items in Alex Kidd.
which is awkward. Like, it was nice to have a start and select button on the NES.
Right. According to RF Generation, there's 22 games released in 1986 on the Master System. I got Action Fighter, which is like a spy hunter clone-like game. Alex Kidd in Miracle World. We already said Astro Warrior. Black Belt, which kind of played like Kung Fu. Choplifter, which is a fantastic port of the computer game. F-16 Fighting Falcon, which is pretty shitty. Fantasy Zone, awesome game.
Fantasy Zone, sweet.
Ghost House, meh.
And that's on the cards. I don't know if everybody knows this, but the original Master System took cartridges, and it also took card-based games. The problem with the card-based games is that the maximum size of the cards was 32 kilobytes.
Right, it was
So
supposed to
it's
be like budget games could be released for it because cartridges
Right.
are expensive.
That never really
And-
worked out, though. Not too many.
Yeah, they didn't do a lot of them. They wanted them to be portable. You know, those you can take it to school and trade with your friends and stuff like that. They didn't put it on the Sega Master System too, so it didn't do well enough for them to have backwards compatibility on its own system.
Are
when
those
they
the same
released it.
dimensions as the TurboGrafx?
Yeah, pretty
It's the
close.
same-
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty close. So.
Finishing the list here, we got Marksman Shooting and Trap Shooting, which is crappy light gun game. My Hero, which is not bad. The Ninja. Pro Wrestling, which I find endearing. We
he-
kind of talked about Pro
dude doesn't
Wrestling
have
with
his
Joe
head.
Gagney. Rambo First Blood Part 2, which played like Commando. In fact, I think in Japan it was basically a Commando knockoff, which they just threw Sylvester Stallone into. Super Tennis, Teddy Boy, Transbot, and World Grand Prix. World Grand Prix, you could create your own tracks, but it basically just played like pole position. Not, again, I think this is on par with what the NES had to go in its first year. A little more, Fantasy Zone is really cool. That's like the one Sega arcade game. Hang On's really good. And Alex Kidd's like the one good original, but Alex Kidd is not Super Mario Brothers. It's close. But a lot of, Alex Kidd deserves a lot more credit, and he's a dead character now and kind of a joke. But that first Alex Kidd game was pretty freaking good.
Well, and nobody wants to play Master System with Harrison Ford. Oh, we love you,
Brendan Bird.
Yes.
I want to have him on a cast, but it'll probably never happen.
So what grade did it get?
It got a
Good question.
Game Informer, they probably gave it in
C
half.
minus.
Ooh. Well, actually, if you're going with just that,
I'd go with a C.
yeah.
I'd go with on it. So if we're gonna do day one launch day, I'd go with a Q because that
doesn't
it's a packet game.
doesn't even
What?
qualify,
What?
but
Yeah.
it didn't fail. It did survive,
It did survive.
It survived
yes.
for one. It's still surviving in Brazil.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that says a lot.
and
But, I mean, just as we say in this list, just because something does or doesn't have a good launch doesn't really show
No.
whether it, how like its longevity
Right.
in the
Right,
in the
right,
market.
but it obviously didn't propel itself to great numbers. And a quick little note with the Master System was in 1988, Sega they had a decent. They were sold a few 100,000 Master Systems, but they were losing 16-1 sales wise to Nintendo. So Sega just gave up and sold, or I don't know, they contracted Tonka to do all of their sales, and the Master System tanked even more after that point. Tonka didn't know what the fuck they were doing.
They marketed toys. They did not market systems,
Right.
and they didn't know how to do it. So they ended up doing it so poorly that Sega had to drop them. And basically, it was such a failure, Sega had to walk away from the system.
Right. But thankfully, because of that early failure, we got the Genesis when we did. But that's another topic. All right. So C-, everybody's kind of on board with that C range?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
a C, yeah.
Yeah. C,
I'm not giving. I'm
not getting a B and maybe a D, but it's that's about right on. That's a fair grade.
It gets a meh.
I'd almost give it a D just because it only came with one game at launch.
Yeah, you can't argue with that.
But you got the shooty, so you technically got 2 games with it.
Yeah, but like you couldn't buy something new. I mean, you had to wait for something new to come out. And I mean, I would think if you successfully launched, then you want to be
who's buying a Master System on day one? I'm thinking like that first year, like that when it was out, and that is 22 games.
Yeah,
aren't horrible.
But that's the thing is like, if I've got a game system, there's 2 game systems out. Neither one of them have really like been in the market ahead of time, so they're both fresh and brand new. The industry's dead. I pick the Master System. I go to the Master System side, and there's one game available. It's the game that it came with.
By Christmas time, there's 22 games out, and then there's about 22 games out for the NES.
There were 20 games because 2 of those games had variations.
Packets,
Yeah,
right.
they had variations on the label. So
more than a
technically there was
dozen.
20. So there were 20 games. How many did Nintendo have year one?
A little bit more than that, but not,
Year one.
Year one, it only had those 15, and then that was a test market year, and then the next year they had another 20 or so. So you're not talking very big numbers either way.
It's kind of like one of those 3DS or Vita now.
Right.
What are we?
Yeah,
going,
we're arguing over scraps from Longshank's table. When you deserve God given right to something greater.
I have no idea what's going on. What's the
I'm
next
doing
system, by the way?
Shitty Braveheart.
TurboGrafx 16.
Mr. Tatton.
Oh, I get to talk again. Awesome. All right, so TurboGrafx 16, which I have to admit is one of my favorite systems of all time. But again, I'm going to keep complaining about this every single time it comes up until we hit the first system that came out after the internet came out. No good information about what happened at launch. As best as I can tell, the launch price was $199. I'm going to grab that one from the Ultimate History of Video Games book. The range from internet research is anywhere from $150 to $300.
What year is this again?
This is August of 1989, so it was 2 weeks after the Genesis test market launch. I guess we probably should have done Genesis next.
No.
Oh, well, too late.
They're right right next to one another.
Yeah, so the launch titles were Keith Courage and the Alpha Zones, which was a pack-in, Blazing Lasers, China Warrior.
That was a launch game?
Yeah.
Nice. Sorry.
You said 88?
89.
89, okay.
China Warrior, Vigilante, and Alien Crush, which I was surprised Alien Crush was a launch game. That's fantastic.
I didn't know it was an early game. I didn't know.
Quick note, $199 and $89 is $368.82 in 2012.
I can't wait until we do the inflation on the freaking Neo Geo.
Yeah, it's well over that. It's like 1,200. Anyway, we'll see.
Let's see right here.
So here's the
arm.
Leg. All right, so some interesting things to know about the launch of the TurboGrafx 16. Advertising-wise, out of the gate, it immediately came out, started attacking, comparing itself against the NES as being better. It advertised itself as the first 16-bit system, which Sega very quickly called them out on, and they had to retract it. The problems that it had was that the launch titles they had couldn't stand up against like the launch titles Genesis had. So, specifically, there really weren't third-party games for the TurboGrafx, and the games were very Japanese. They're very Japanese-centered. They weren't built for an American market. And when you take something like Keith Courage and compare it against like Altered Beast of the Genesis, there's really no comparison.
Keith Courage is terrible for a pack-in.
Yeah, no joke.
I mean, it's not a terrible
Altered
game.
Beast is not very good. Okay.
Altered Beast is iconic and funny, and it displayed what the Genesis was to do, but that's a different
I mean,
subject.
it's like the graphics were really good. I mean, it talked. I mean, there was a lot of cool things it did. I mean, it was very
and what
very
a
pretty.
name, Altered Beast,
Check
as
that
opposed to like Keith Courage and the
But
Alpha
Genesis
Zones.
is
Like
next, so
Yes.
let's
Oh, yeah.
let's-
So a couple like quick interesting things. One thing I learned for the first time, which I probably could have assumed, but I learned it officially, is Hue card actually stands for Hudson card, since Hudson was the one that made the TurboGrafx. Which I never knew. I thought that was kind of cool. The other thing I thought was kind of cool was Keith Courage and the Alpha Zones. That had a different name in Japan, and they named the U.S. one after Keith Schaefer, who was the VP of NEC Technologies. And he actually has a little trophy with the very first Hue card of Keith Courage that they made for him to commemorate, his efforts to get the system launched and everything.
Did you say if that was that a pack-in?
Yeah, Keith Courage was a pack-in.
Most
Game Informer gave it a C+. I'd have to be inclined to agree. There are some pretty cool games on there, but
the pack-in title, blah.
The pack-in title was god-awful.
Terrible.
Walking guns, like pistols. Like, it's really a not very well put together game.
Our type is good, but not so much better than the Master System version.
Alien Crush.
Blazing Lasers is
Blazing Lasers is awesome.
System.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And Alien Crush is one of the best on the system. So it's funny when you look at these systems and like some of their best games are the ones they came out of the gate with.
But yeah, I mean, but like Vigilante was on the Master System. It didn't scream next generation. It screamed Generation Plus.
Yeah, better colors.
Yeah, I mean,
somewhat better sound effects.
The controller still only had 2 buttons, so it was still like directly similar to the NES controller. Genesis was launching with 3. The Super Nintendo would follow with 6. I mean, there were a lot of things that held it back. I mean, it was definitely like a mid-generation step.
Do you know about? I heard that it was only advertised. I never heard about it except for once in a while we get like an EB pamphlet that would have some information about. And I heard that it was only sold and marketed in larger areas like cities. Do you know anything about that?
It probably wasn't in places like Kmart and whatnot. It was probably only
that
in
would make sense.
Malls.
Yeah, I think it was like EBs,
Yeah.
Babbages, things like that.
I certainly don't remember seeing any commercials for it. I was living up near Cleveland.
We rarely saw systems around here for sale. Like later when the Turbo Duo came out, we saw a lot. And what's funny is internet research wise, there's plenty of information Turbo Duo forward. Like when I'm looking for launch prices,
that was a different company at that point too, wasn't it? TTI something or other. They changed the organization over here. Whatever.
Maybe.
We're not talking about that launch. We're talking about the TurboGrafx itself. And when did Bonk come along?
That's a good question. I am not too sure.
Did that come along right around Sonic, or did it come around before Sonic?
I was pretty sure it was before, but
it's obviously on a Pac-Man game, so
probably before they had.
Yeah, I didn't
3 or 4 versions
have
of it.
any.
1989.
Wow.
And when did Sonic hit?
91. Well, but the TurboGrafx itself was 89. Let me see in RF Gen. But
interesting,
because if you include Bonk in that by Christmas time.
Yeah,
that bumps it up a grade in my book.
Yeah, because Bonk was an excellent platformer, and Bonk could stand against the, arguably against Mario 3 and stuff like that. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's better, but I think it's a very good competitor to it. It's the same way that Alex Kidd was a great competitor to the original Super Mario Brothers.
RF Generation says 1990. So,
well, I'm going for Wikipedia, so who knows?
So that doesn't make you sad that Bonk's Adventure then appeared on NES in 1994 or whatever year it came out. They'd just completely given up at that point.
Well, they were already, they started out releasing Nintendo games because they did, the Adventure Island series and stuff like that.
The copyright
Professor
on the box
Higgins.
says 1990. Fucking Professor Higgins. Buttery as fuck.
Dr. Higgins.
So, 1990 on Bonk, so.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess I'd agree with the C grade for the launch. I mean, it was average. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. Nothing stood out. It was funny that they had to admit that they weren't the first 16-bit system by like 2 weeks.
It had good controllers. Now, so
one controller
NES,
though. How about that for shit?
Yeah, one controller.
NES had the AV connections. SMS, was it boxed with it? I don't remember. I didn't see it on my stuff.
I don't remember.
RF.
Good question.
Yes,
I'm pretty sure it was.
But it had the because even the Genesis was boxed RF. But you could buy the video cable, which was the same as the Commodore's video cable.
The NES came with
right.
Yeah.
The
First
AV.
system that did that.
And the TurboGrafx, you had to use like the turbo base.
You had to
like,
buy
flip
Right.
on the
the-
back.
Yeah, it tried
Buy
the
the
TurboGrafx
base.
is to make you buy lots of extra shit, like the
Yes.
multi-tap. You have to buy that to play 2-player games.
Yes.
The
Yes.
power base converter to have it look good.
What was
else
that
would they
called? The
sell?
turbo something.
It's the turbo tab or the turbo stick was the their
No, the
advantage.
the AV box.
Yeah, no, I
I thought it was
totally.
a turbo base.
I think it's called just the power
Power base converter is
converter.
just Master
Oh,
System.
that's
Master
sorry,
System,
yeah.
SMS
Yeah.
to Genesis.
But yeah, whatever. You had to buy a whole separate unit, which are hard to find these days. But that is a pretty that's a Microsoft move. And NEC is a computer company.
Who's still a computer company?
But whatever.
It's the turbo something because everything they made was
It's the
turbo
turbo,
something.
yes,
Um,
for Dom and DOS.
so
Yeah, but Alien Crush being a launch game.
I know.
Wow.
I know.
But that's kind of like its best game too, which is weird. They didn't really improve on it.
and
Yeah,
Devil's
no.
Crush.
Devil's Crush.
Devil's Crush
of
is
people
better.
like-
Okay, I get the two confused.
Yeah,
Both of those are awesome. I mean, those are really good games.
The best
call.
non-pinball
Well, and it
pinball
was
game
it was
ever.
a very very Japanese system. So if you're marketing it to people who know Japan and like Japan,
So was the NES.
but you had so
But you had like U.S. licensed games in that too. I mean, you had like real NFL football. It was Madden, when did Madden hit? Was that
That was
Genesis?
Turbo Duo.
Was it Turbo Duo?
World Tennis Magoo.
The tennis RPG.
Yes.
All
I
right.
mean, because like we were setting up on the Genesis, which we're going to hit in a second. But like you had to go up against Joe Montana football. What was it? The Vander Holyfield boxing.
Oh yeah, and they marketed the hell. That was marketed for Americans. The Genesis was an American system.
Fucking A.
Yeah. No. Oh wait.
Sue's doing Genesis, by the way.
me.
You're
You're
doing-
already doing it? Sorry.
Let's
go ahead and
Steve
roll it.
go.
Why not?
Okay, so
It does what
Genesis.
Nintendo don't. We know that.
So before I talk about what actually came out on launch, I think were most people not aware of Genesis until, except for Chris, Sonic came out. I certainly didn't know much about it until started showing ads for Sonic, and that was 2 years after it was launched. It was launched in August 14th, 1989. And I had... This is the list I have on my paper here. It was different in some different sites, but not too much, not by more than one or two games. Alex Kidd and the Enchanted Castle, Altered Beast, Last Battle, Space Harrier 2, Super Thunderblade, Thunder Force 2, and Tommy Lasorda Baseball. Launch price $190.
$350, $28, and $2012.
Okay. I played some of these in preparation. Alex Kidd and the Enchanted Castle I played for about 2-3 minutes.
It's not very
It was
good.
terrible.
It's really wonky controls, and
Altered-
it is a throwback to the original Alex Kidd 2, which is a shame because the first one's so good.
Altered Beast, I remember being very cool when because the sprites were so big, but it's a pretty repetitive game.
Tech demo.
Yeah.
Wise from your grave.
It's awesome.
And I was even
mean,
impressed by the Master System version of that. That's what I played before I played
Violence.
Genesis even.
You know that's kind of
yeah.
taking a level of violence you really didn't see on a launch of
But
other
and
systems.
Sega was-
that took the arcade game and brought it home more than anything
True.
else at the time, and
True.
that's what the Genesis was sold as, was the arcade system. And until Neo Geo came around, that was your best bet.
Super Thunderblade I played, and it seems like the same as Space Harrier 2, which also was released
Yeah.
on the same day. Super Thunderblade had, this is my notes, terrible death music. It sounds like the system has exploded when you die.
I have a new ringtone.
It was very hard, and you don't really even need to shoot things. You just dodge things.
Duck, dodge, and what? I don't remember. The second time I used that joke, I don't even remember all the...
Some early games, Mystic Defender, Revenge of Shinobi, and Super Hang-On.
Revenge of Shinobi.
So it did have a lot of
Awesome.
sequels to Master System games, which they couldn't really rely on people knowing the original games. But I don't know, it made them seem more important, like they were part of a bigger series. Notable, the next year, the two notable games, Golden Axe and Phantasy Star 2. Those are 1990 games.
Strider. Wasn't that 90?
I don't know.
Didn't get that one. I've got a few others on this. This is RF generation, so take it or leave it.
Okay.
Arnold Palmer Tournament Golf, not a very cool arcadey golf game. Forgotten Worlds, fantastic Capcom arcade game. Ghouls and Ghosts, fantastic Capcom arcade game. Last Battle sucked. I think that was Fist of the North Star.
That was
that was on your
day
list?
one.
Yeah. Okay. World Championship Soccer, meh. So Rambo 3.
Chris, what do you think of Tommy Little Sword of Baseball?
Pretty good. It was it's a direct. It felt like it was part of the lineage of Reggie Jackson baseball, which we should all be familiar with after Hexadecathlon. A little peppier version of that, but same perspective, same gameplay.
Had a good cover.
Had a very good,
yeah.
but it was and then but that's not a bad. It definitely felt like next gen. The bigger characters, the stereo sound, the just. I remember my cousin had one because he had a Master System. They traded up to a Genesis that second year, like 1990. So a lot of these early games I'm really familiar with. Strider being like the one that made me lose my shit.
Strider was awesome.
If you've ever played Strider the arcade game's awesome. The Genesis version was a freaking awesome port at the time. People can find flaws in it now, but it still sold me on the system back in 89, 90.
I remember the Genesis Does commercial with Joe Montana and Michael Jackson.
Buster fucking Douglas. Represent
Yeah.
C-Bus.
Yeah.
There's going to be a bobblehead.
Genesis
Does.
Does.
At the Clippers this sometime soon.
So it got a B. I'd go with that. I think.
Yeah, I think it proved its point. It didn't have that killer app for 2 years, but it was cool system for that time before Sonic came out, and Sonic came out right at the right time to propel to the next level.
That was an American release too. That was they were pushing that for Americans.
It was, and I think this was like the first real launch I remember too. I mean, it wasn't. It was still small time, but they had the magazines telling people it's coming out, it's coming out. They had all their Master System people with the Sega Visions or whatever they called the magazine back then, telling people what's coming out. Nintendo would do them one better with Nintendo Power and Super NES, but this was the first time that there was a previous system and they were building up to the next system and actually exceeded. Like, whereas the Atari 5200 was a joke, and that was the only really console sequel I could think of. But yeah,
marketing-wise, they did a really good job with it. But when you compare the games that were released on the Sega Genesis and you compare the games on the TurboGrafx 16, I'd rather play this TurboGrafx 16. I mean, I'm still going to give it okay, cool. You get a good grade or whatever. But if I had my druthers and I had the opportunity to go in and buy a system, I would be buying the TurboGrafx 16.
Right, and I think most people would even pick an NES over both of these. So
yeah, agreed.
That's assuming that I didn't have that I already had an NES and I was ready to move on to another system, because I had an NES forever.
But the attitude of the 16-bit with the bigger sprites and sound, that's what. This was real 16-bit next-gen stuff. The TurboGrafx, not quite.
It's a different.
There's
and they were going for a different level of realism. I mean, the TurboGrafx had the cuter, the more Japanese feel. The bigger, like anime-styled characters.
The TurboGrafx was an excellent competitor to the Nintendo because it was the Nintendo but better.
Right. It was. When we talk about generations of game consoles, there's always that one system that kind of straddles both sides, like the Dreamcast straddles the PlayStation and the PS2. The TurboGrafx straddled the NES era with the 16-bit era. That was a straddling console. Intellivision was a straddling between Atari and Coleco. So that's what TurboGrafx is. But
that's a straddling going on.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so
what do we got next?
August 23rd, 1991. The Super Nintendo launched. It was $199.99. It lasted from 1991 to 1999. Was released with Super Mario World, which ended up selling 20 million copies worldwide and was a player's choice game. And that was amazingly huge. Comparing, you've got the Super Mario Brothers 3, and really that was kind of like the pinnacle of the NES. Not sure how it would go any bigger. And Super Nintendo has my favorite commercial my absolute favorite, like, I get goosebumps thinking about it. When they were bringing that out, they did a commercial where they're showing gameplay of Super Mario World, and they've got the announcer guy, and he's talking about how the levels are bigger and the seas are deeper, and it's just, they're talking about how they've taken what you love and it's bigger. It's better.
Does it get closer into the screenshots and
Yes.
his voice gets louder?
Yes.
And
Yes. And it just keeps taking you like the skies are higher, and you see him with the cape, and you're like, oh my god, he's flying, and like he's in the ocean, and what's going on there, and like Yoshi shows up, and you don't know what the hell's going on with that. And it was just an amazing commercial. This was really one of the first launches that I specifically remember the advertising
and
for.
before it came out,
mine
knowing
too.
that it was coming.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
'cause,
And,
like-
oh my god, it's a Nintendo, but it's super.
It's a
How can that exist?
Super
How can there be
Nintendo?
something better than Nintendo?
Quick note: $199 in 1991 to 2012 is $335.78.
So we have Super Mario World. F-Zero was a launch game, which used the Mode 7 chip. So you actually had that kind of cool 3D look on it.
Right out of the gate.
Right out of the gates. Pilot Wings also used Mode 7, which was kind of a beautiful,
Tech demo.
Yeah. Well, sure. Gradius 3, which was, Konami arcade port.
I like that everybody complains about the slowdown, but
Fucking sucks.
the bubbles.
And there's
so
there's
good.
reduced.
No, it's fucking terrible when all those bubbles and you can barely crawl in. That's bad.
Well, and so there are continues in that version, and there is a level of reduced difficulty. So they actually dumbed that down for the
They
SNES
Americanized
launch.
it.
Yay!
the casual gamers.
Final Fantasy USA, and SimCity, which was done originally by Maxis. It was a PC game, but when they brought it out stateside,
Nintendoized it.
They Nintendoized it. So
Fantastic.
Nintendo got their hands on it, and they put in Dr. Wright, which was from Will Wright, who is just a fun little character in it. Bowser shows up. There's neat music. It's an edutainment game, but man, that's a fun one. It's also a million seller, so it's a player's choice game.
I went nuts over this when I was a kid. Like, I was going through, like, all my Nintendo powers. I would read them, like, over and over and over again. Like, trying to get my parents to get it. And what's funny is, I did end up getting it. I got it launch Christmas. And I got it, and I got SimCity. Those are my two games. Because I played SimCity on my Mag 512K, and it was black and white. I was all excited about playing SimCity in color. But the not being backwards compatible with the Nintendo games, because of the 7800,
It
was a big selling
It was
point.
going
Like,
to be backwards compatible, and they took it out the last minute to save money.
yeah. Yeah, my folks were like on board until it disappeared. Then they're like, "Oh, well, you can't use your old stuff with it." Well, I don't know now or whatever. It was interesting how big, like how important backwards compatibility is. But oh my gosh, like I was just nuts and like about that. Like when I found it, like Christmas morning, it's just Mario World like all day, and I still think that Super Mario World is the best game on the Super NES. It's gorgeous, it's fluid, it holds a great frame rate, it's very in-depth, there's tons of boards in it, you can save, I think it's like the pinnacle of
Quick poll: Mario World or Mario 3? What's the better game?
Mario World.
3.
Oh.
I say 3.
World, because you can save.
Too close to call.
It's really close. I love Karibo
World
Shu.
isn't.
I love the
World isn't head and shoulders above 3.
No, it's very close. That's the
Yeah,
thing.
I even
like
think
I'm
it's
not.
close, but
Yeah, I'm not going to say that it's. I'm not going to
It
say
wasn't the leap that. 3 to 4. We'll just call Mario World Mario 4 just for the sake of less.
Wasn't the
syllables for
leap
me.
that
It wasn't
1
the
to
leap
3
from 2 to
was-
3 or
yeah.
1 to 3.
But it didn't.
it was made about the same time though.
but
Yeah.
it
And I
didn't
don't like the flying mechanics, but
really.
nitpick.
It's so
need
colorful though.
to be. I mean,
I
I would obviously go with 3.
sprites are gorgeous.
but if somebody, I've never played a Super Nintendo before. Oh my God, we're putting this game in. We're handing you a controller, and anybody can play it. And you sit down and you have fun playing it.
and
It was a great title to launch with.
and Nintendo dropped the freaking ball with
By
not
never
putting
topping
that
it.
on the All Stars for the Wii. I don't know what they were thinking by not putting that on there. That was the dumbest thing.
I mean, that whole thing was a travesty, I think.
So I remember playing this actually very close to launch. My grandfather, my dad, and I went down. We were going to South Carolina or something along those lines. We were taking a trip. We ended up in Kentucky, and I was there meeting family I never knew I had. And the one cousin in 60 times down the line, whatever, had leg surgery, and he was bedridden, and they bought him a Super Nintendo. And we sat there, and I remember sitting there watching him play Super Nintendo, and my dad got to have a turn at it, and it's like, this is the coolest thing ever. The difference in the graphics really was very nice. The sound coming out of that system was so much better than what we were used to for the NES. I love the sound out of the NES, but the Super Nintendo had great sound. So taking that, the commercial was right. They did a great job with it. This is
No.
and I gush because the Super Nintendo really is that's a sweet spot. That's number one in my,
Absolutely. I'm gonna have to say to burst your bubble though that the Super NES did not have the successful launch that Nintendo had hoped. Sega was very smart in releasing Sonic the Hedgehog that same time that the Super NES launched, and its cheaper price and original game, because it was something new that upped the Genesis to the number one system, and Sega had the best market share for 91, 92, 93.
And that was one of the first ones too where, from a marketing perspective, they really started going after Mario for being like a more family-friendly, kitty kind of character, because, Sonic had attitude.
Right.
Yeah, and speed, and it was the 90s, and everything had to be extreme.
But
he was extremely fast. He like chili dogs.
Don't mock it. It was new. It was original. And I love Mario World too, but it was a little stale at that point, and they never did another proper Mario World until the freaking Wii.
Right. No, agreed.
So, but let's look at some of the
DS version.
No, yeah, like our friend's Sonic was cooler. Was better.
That was cooler.
Okay,
and I was in high school at the time.
Wait, I see a game on there that really stonking made the system work. So go ahead, do your list. ActRaiser was amazing, by the way. Yes, ActRaiser was amazing, by the way. So
I wish we had a video podcast for this.
Point
for this
and growl.
very reason.
But I just want to say that the Super NES it stumbled out of the gate a little bit because of its price, and because Mario 4 did not capture the imagination like Mario 3 did. It wasn't because Mario 4 is bad, it just didn't. It was a little stale at the point, just a little bit. Some of the other games that came out in 91, ActRaiser, which is fucking amazing, like you said.
Fantastic.
Didn't sell very much, but that was just one of those.
Everything works.
SimCity, it was like SimCity.
SimCity plus Castlevania.
Final Fantasy II, oh my god.
Final Fantasy.
My favorite Final Fantasy to date.
Well, yes, and in fact, it is Tatton and I.
Spoony Bard.
Yeah. So my neighbor, we had just moved to our house. It was a difficult transition for me. The neighbor down the street had a Super Nintendo, and he had Final Fantasy II, and I went over there every single day. I remember calling the Nintendo Power Hotline because I couldn't beat Bagan. And that game was beyond... Because I had played Final Fantasy, and I had played Dragon Warrior. These were things that I had not only played, but mastered. So walking into that, it was gorgeous, it was beautiful, it sounded so good.
Yeah, the first time I heard it, it felt like a real orchestra.
Oh, well, you put it in, and there's a harp playing the Final Fantasy theme.
Yep.
Well, and that was the thing, too, that the Super Nintendo really had over the Genesis, and the Genesis really had over the Super Nintendo, was their sound chips. Because the Super Nintendo...
They're just different. One's not necessarily better than the other.
Right, it depends on what it's doing.
It depends on what it's doing.
Yes.
Because like for the orchestrated stuff, like Final Fantasy, you could not get something that gorgeous out of the Genesis.
No.
But the rock whales and like the rock kind of music and techno and stuff...
Chip tunes. Because Genesis is an actual chip tune synthesizer. The Super NES is sampled MIDI.
I want to hear somebody do the Mega Man X music on the Genesis
That'd be fucking
sound chip.
amazing.
Just because it was not suited for that Super Nintendo.
Yep. That horrible horn sound that they used for everything on Super NES.
Yeah.
In the wrong spots, it just sounded awful. But here are some like big games that should have been on the Super NES that were flat. Like Gradius 3 we already mentioned. Final Fight.
Final Fight was
One player only, no guy.
that's true. And they
The
had to
first
re-release
John
it.
Madden football. I don't
Okay,
think that-
Lagoon was awesome.
Then there's Draken, which is terrible.
Draken was good. Shark Eats Jesus. Come on.
No.
If you play Draken,
I did enjoy Super
you can make
Bases
Jesus on
Loaded.
it.
Nice.
Super Castlevania 4, fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic game. Oh my god, that was amazing.
Super Ghouls and Ghosts, a little
I'm
slow
not a
there.
fan.
Super Archetype, not great. A little even more slow than the original Archetype.
UN Squadron, hello.
UN Squadron,
Okay.
RPG elements in a shooter.
Ultraman. Because they brought that stateside.
And, you know, my dad and my game, we always played golf games in True Golf Classics Wildlife Country Club. That's when I got my Super NES. That was the game we got with it.
My
Not
brother-in-law
great
played
now,
that.
but that's my dad and me's game, so.
I still love that. My brother-in-law played that all the time, and I still think it's one of my favorite golf games of all time.
So, okay.
But here's the Nintendo slop fest in this Game Informer article. It gets an A minus. I would still say B because it wasn't out of the gate. It should have crushed Sega right out of the door, and they didn't.
It should have destroyed Sega.
It
The way they
should've.
were setting it up, it should have destroyed
And
it.
Sega was
should've
doing the
been
thing where you
close.
could buy the system and they would send you Sonic when it came out.
Yeah.
Around that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It should have been a blowout, and it wasn't. And the fact that it wasn't means that they don't get A grade; they get B grade.
Right, it should be B.
You're giving it a grade.
I know,
Yeah,
I'm that guy.
yeah.
I'm not going to give it a grade
I'm going to
B.
give it a 79 out of 101.
What the crap?
I'm going to give it hot dog out of bun. I don't know.
I don't understand what you're saying.
I like the grade it has.
So I'm going to say that it had 3 games that launched with it, and we're talking the proper launch run of it. 3 games that were Player's Choice games. They went on to be official Player's Choice games. The F-Zero showed off the systems, you know, what it was able to do. The marketing, it sold me, damn it. You can tell it sold me because I'm just like, gosh, swoon. Because I love the Super Nintendo. I'm still gonna give it an A.
Of course you are.
It had Super
Was there any
Mario
doubt?
World. It had Sim City. It sold me.
We could tell you were going to say that when you gave your speech.
A!
Yes. I'll just like to remind everybody that I'm the biggest Genesis fan in the world and still gave it a B. So I would like to say I'm more impartial than Miss Becky over on my right.
What do you think, Steve?
It's an A. It's an A.
I'm going to go with Chris and say B.
Really?
Yeah, 'cause-
Team Chris!
Yeah, Team Chris, and I love it. Like I absolutely love the Super Nintendo, and
It's purple.
it just
Oh, see, that's the one thing. We
Did
should have
I-
gotten the multicolored buttons.
Did I mention that Street Fighter 2 is what put it on the map in 92? That's what took off. That's when
Yeah.
they got off the mat and started fighting was Street Fighter 2. And you can imagine that an arcade game, an actual real life arcade game that Nintendo had a history of
and
ignoring
then
arcade games.
and then we get locked up in the whole
There's our war.
violence or not violence, and
Yeah, it's, I mean, it, you
like
know,
when Mortal Kombat hit, and all
start
the
punching each
controversy
other
from
with
it.
these
Yeah.
haymakers, and it just that's the most glorious time in video games for me and a lot of other people my
Oh.
age.
I get to talk next. Oh, I already got to talk, but I get to talk next.
Yeah, Sega CD.
Sega
Go.
CD. All right, so released October 15th, 1992. It was going up against the TurboGrafx CD, and it was $2.99. I don't know if there's a 99 at the end of it. All I found was $2.99.
Doesn't matter.
All right.
For comparison's sake, since we didn't have it on the list, the Turbo Duo was $3.99.
Okay.
When did that come out?
92.
92.
Well, no. So are we?
Well, we
talking
got a
the-
chapter later.
No,
Screw it.
but
Let's
hold
go.
on. The Turbo Duo or the TurboGrafx CD? Because the TurboGrafx CD was the add-on unit for the TurboGrafx.
Right, that came out first. The Turbo Duo didn't come out.
All right,
later,
so
but whatever. Screw
This
it.
release was kind of wild. The unit itself, it had sprite enhancement. It had 10 extra sound channels on it. It had more memory on it. It did have a slightly faster drive than the TurboGrafx CD. It had 150 kilobyte transfer rate. So it had 2 pack-in CDG music CD samplers.
They might be Giants was included in
$489.77
that.
for
that
the
is very
inflation
true, yes.
adjusted price on that $489. So very pricey unit. The Genesis was at $99 at this point. So you have this inexpensive kick-ass system, and then you have this super
Really
expensive
expensive
add-on top CD-ROM technology was brand new at the time, and
this is remember that this is the one that goes underneath the Genesis. This is not the side-by-side unit.
The cool Model 1 with the automatic door.
That didn't have a button that you could make
still
it
works
open.
For most of us, right?
Mine works.
Yeah, ours still works.
I've run into a couple of them where they wouldn't eject the CDs, and there's no way to get it if it doesn't initialize that in the menu. You can't get it to open because it has to be driven by the software to open.
But go on. What we got for games on this thing?
I just double checked real quick. The TurboGrafx CD, it is the CD, not the Duo. So the CD upgrade was $399, released in 1990. Oh my god,
Jesus!
So it had 2 years up on it.
All right, so the pack-in was Sega Classics 4-in-1. It came with Shinobi, Columns, Streets of Rage, and Golden Axe. Another pack-in was Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which was by the company ICOM, who did Shadowgate and
it's very
Uninvited.
computer CD-ROM like.
Yeah, it was an interactive movie with lots of FMV. Soul Feast, which was another pack-in. It was by Renovation, which is a shmup.
Another Genesis version, Soul Dees.
Yeah, Soul Dees.
Yes.
Genesis one.
So we have,
Cobra Command, which was yet another pack-in. It was based on a Laserdisc arcade game, and it's a shooter. Chuck Rock, which was
these are all pack-ins?
Those were all pack-ins.
Chuck Rock's a pack-in?
No.
Okay.
No, so that is officially not a pack-in. Chuck Rock is a side-scrolling platformer by Sony ImageSoft.
Port from Genesis.
Yeah. Okay, so then we get to the Black Hole Assault, which was a fighter. It's a sequel to Heavy Nova, and it has anime cutscenes in it. Sewer Shark, which is a rail shooter, has FMV. So there's some fun stuff I'm going to talk about in just a minute about some of these games. In Excess, Make My Video, and Marky Mark Make My Video were both launch games. They were universally panned and financial disasters, but come on, good vibrations, yo. He denies the fact that he was in Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch at this point. He won't even talk about it.
He also could prevent 9/11.
Could he?
He said he could prevent 9/11 had he been on those planes.
Oh.
But keep going.
Okay, so...
4 people.
Yeah. All right, so here's the deal. Night Trap. It's FMV. It was by Digital Pictures. Digital Pictures was one of the the big company that did all of the FMV productions. It cost $1.5 million to produce,
which is pocket change these days.
All right, so
it was originally meant for like a VCR system.
Night Trap was originally developed for Hasbro's Nemo/Control Vision, which used VHS tapes.
I would give that system an F for launch.
Well, they scrapped it, so it didn't even get to launch.
It deserves a fail.
So it was they filmed the stuff for this. So Sewer Shark was part of Nemo, which part of the original footage for Sewer Shark, which I don't know that they went with, was directed by John Dykstra.
Star Wars guy.
Yes. Yeah. So worked with George Lucas in Industrial Lights and Magic.
Rob Fulop had something to do with that too. He worked for Magic in the Atari days, and he's been in the industry since then too. I saw him at a Classic Gaming Expo a few years ago.
So Night Trap.
Was that instantly... Are you going to talk about the controversy?
Yes, I am. So there were congressional hearings for offensive game material. This was cited. That game was cited as one of the primary factors for the evolving of the ESRB. Mm-hmm. On December 16th, 1993, it was removed from the shelves at Toys R Us and FAO Schwartz. Joseph Lieberman of Connecticut and Herbert H. Kroll of Wisconsin said it was shameful, ultra-violent, sick, disgusting, encouraging effort to trap and kill women.
And they never played it.
The producers say the plot is to prevent the trapping and killing of women. It only sold through its first production run of that game specifically, and it did star Dana Plato.
I want to say this is hilarious because I played this game on a display kiosk at Walmart when it was controversial. I think it was a joke. Like someone put it out,
That's awesome.
and the boss didn't know.
Well,
It's
and the
not.
thing
It's
is,
not that bad.
It's
I know,
really
I
not
know.
bad. It's
Terrible.
It's
a
B,
awful
but
fucking game. But
with the FMV games in general, they get panned. But you rate FMV games based on the movies they contain. The gameplay is never going to be great. One of my favorite games on the Sega CD is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and I'm not even a Power Rangers fan, but it's basically just Power Ranger episode excerpts where you hit buttons to go along with actions like kicking and punching and that sort of thing. And it's freaking fun. Or Night Trap, it's a cheesy B-movie starring Dana Plato, so you appreciate it as a cheesy B-movie starring Dana Plato, who's now dead.
Well-
or Sewer Shark, who has that guy who's like a character actor who's been in like every horrible Italian role that you could think of playing the boss. He was in Die Hard, he was in Total Recall, he was in a couple other movies. I can't even think of his name off the top of my head.
Well, so the big problem with these guys is that they promised full motion video, and they promised it in a big, big way that we were, we're providing you with movies, that interactive movies, and they gave you a quarter screen little, very awkward, blocky looking thing. There is a release of Night Trap. If anybody's ever looking to play Night Trap, get Night Trap that is for the Sega CD 32X combo.
Isn't there a 3DO version?
Yes, maybe.
Okay,
Maybe?
sorry.
No, I
Is
don't.
there?
I think so.
But
Whatever.
Well, no, because the video screen on the 32X one, the 32X processor is actually able to handle
More
bigger
colors.
video. Yeah, so you're able to see more. The system was pretty much panned. It didn't do well at all.
No, it did. It did well because it lasted for several years on the market, and it was just
This launch
and
is
it-
awful.
It's not an F, but
Well, what
It
did
was-
it get rated?
it wasn't even on this list.
Oh,
It lasted for several years. It had 2 hardware iterations.
F
and-
minus.
Give me a fucking break. and like it was geared as a high end add on for people to now that this Genesis was no longer the cutting edge thing. Now the Sega CD would be the cutting edge thing for a year or so, and giving you like all those they had like the Compton's Interactive Encyclopedia and
Well, you did get Secret of Monkey Island, and that was a later that year launch. Secret of Monkey. It was a PC
lot of these-
game. It did okay if it was doing like PC style games, but when they were going for anything that wasn't, it was just so the Make My Video series. I understand what they were trying to do with those guys, but those are the most dated things ever.
Well, you know what? If they were going after the band REM for doing one of those, if REM had made it on here, like I said, you rate the video content, that would be considered a cult classic, I would think.
Have you seen the video content for like Crisscross and CNC?
It's because Crisscross and
is
CNC
hilarious.
fucking suck. They're fucking pop schlock.
Hilarious.
REM is a beloved indie band of all time.
But
and,
they didn't.
and had they been on there,
Yeah.
it probably would have been.
But
Oh, this
that's
is
a
kind of
what
cool.
if.
This is a interest. That's what I'm saying. You have to rate the content of the videos.
yeah, if they had done a Nirvana one, then it would have been the best system.
Fucking
ever.
A, it would have. I mean, that's what I'm saying.
you could do karaoke on the CDG. Isn't that the
Yes.
same as the karaoke format? So
Yeah,
that's
you
not
got
a
it.
thing.
There came with the karaoke disc too. Like it was.
Yeah, it was like you got the game, and then on the back of it, you got the CDG stuff. Like you got the 2 discs in one, like fold over.
And Wonder Dog was a Dragon's Lair type game, I believe, right? Or Time Gal, that's the other.
Time,
Yeah,
yeah,
Time
Time
Gal,
Gal is,
yeah.
yeah.
Wonder
but
Dog, I thought was a side scroller.
Time Gal is very. That was
But-
very flowing. See, I think that was the problem that I have with the system. Time Gal isn't bad because they went with the animation and they did a good job because it was the fully animated. It flowed well.
Right.
It looked great.
and
When-
eventually Dragon's Lair and Space Ace would come out for Sega CD, and that's like. Yeah, I'll talk in the microphone.
If you go with something, it seemed like they were trying to market things that they didn't have polished enough.
They didn't know what to do with all that space. Basically, they had technical limitations with colors and the size of the video, but they had all the space in the world with these CDs, and they didn't know what to do with it yet. The best games on the Sega CD are basically Genesis games with enhancements.
Well, and a lot of the problem with it too was that in the beginning, they were just using the CD space for Redbook audio, which
Right.
was uncompressed and incredibly, wasteful for space. Once they learned how to start just, using the music in the game itself, all of a sudden they had all the space from the Redbook audio that they did, just didn't know how to utilize.
Right, but Night Trap is cheese and was designed as cheese. It was a B movie. The producers would even say when they were making it was a B movie.
And it really wasn't all that violent, to be honest.
It wasn't. Well, it wasn't, and it was.
There was one scene that was controversial because I think there's a couple versions of this.
They sucked the blood out of the girl,
But there's no like blood flying.
oh, and she's in her 90s.
She's in her
90.
It's so PG.
But but at the time, this system was pushing the limits. We were really going into the 90s of the extreme. They're pushing the limits.
They're getting away from the video games being for kids.
Exactly, and that's what Sega did very well.
Right.
Was they weren't making games they weren't making that family friendly Mario.
And at $300, you don't buy that for your kids.
With the price for the system and for what released day one, in my mind, this was not a very good release.
It's not an F.
I'm not going to give it an F because
Right.
it did keep going. I'm saying F minus. You should know the what that's from.
No, I forget.
What? From Strong Bad?
Okay.
Yeah. So, but what I'm saying is, with what you have on here, I don't see a killer app on this.
No.
I do not see. You have to have good software to sell hardware, especially at that $300 price point.
They give you a lot of stuff in the box that's kind of cool. Like the 4-in-1 is pretty cool.
That was like
If
one of
you-
the first ones.
That's
of
like
those,
if you think in terms of marketing, you get $200 in Genesis software in your package. Yeah, because you get 4 Genesis games at $50 a piece, while off $200.
Well, and the other thing too is, this is one of the last systems that actually had a pack-in, which is
True.
funny because at this point, CDs are cheap to manufacture, and you would think that being cheap that you would have
Get
more
more,
pack-in
yeah.
content, and you don't. Like after this, the pack-in is pretty much gone, and your launch price for a game.
Since it did not have a killer app, I think that what was packed in was very, very generous and pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought it was too. It showed off what it could do.
You
had
got
some
the
extra
tech,
value.
you got the CD type run with the consulting detective. You got the Genesis ports. You got the CDG graphics, whatever the fuck that karaoke disc is.
So a
And
C, a D? What would you give it?
I'd give it a C or a D.
I'd give it a C.
Okay.
D.
D.
See, I'd give it a D. Just the price, with the price and what it came with, even the stuff afterwards.
Well-
there's no killer app. It doesn't seem like this is something that you would rush out to go get, unless now I may not be in the right state of mind. Were I a 17-year-old boy and I found out that there was a system that I could play Night Trap on, and oh my god, there's a controversy. That probably sold systems, except for the fact that they pulled them off the shelves.
Well, so here's the problem with it, and this is where you have to really step back in time. This at the time
There was no Huey Lewis make my own video. Sorry.
Was there a Rick Astley? There should have been a Rick Astley.
Oh,
that'd
dude,
have taken
that
a
was
cake.
5 years too late, but that would have been amazing.
Somebody needs to make that.
You have to step back in time and look at technology at the time, because CDs were like right on the birth of coming out. Like,
And
it
it
was
played
really the
CDs.
very beginning of the
Yeah,
technology.
CDs were not ubiquitous yet.
This is
That-
before Seventh Guest, and that really
Yeah, it's before
was
Seventh
the
Guest.
big PC.
It was
Yes.
at the time. It was like 200 to 300 to put a CD-ROM on your computer,
Yep.
Right.
and you could put a CD-ROM on your Genesis for 200 to 300. So
Right.
in that aspect, it was actually priced reasonably, and it's going up against later the 3DO and the CDI, which are launching at like $500 and $600.
Right.
So
right.
it's really expensive for what it is at the time, but it's not expensive compared to
What
other
else
CD
there
systems.
was? Right.
The problem with it is people didn't know what to do with CDs in general. It wasn't just Sega not knowing what to do with CDs with games. Nobody knew what to do with CDs. It was brand new.
Right.
Nobody knew how to handle them. Nobody knew how to market them. And it was almost like, people talk about, fads in history kind of repeating themselves. It was like the second rebirth of, you get to totally buy a computer with your video game system again.
Right.
People were trying to do the San Diego Animals and the Commons Interactive Encyclopedia. There was the Time Life video series for the 3DO later, no, the CDI later. That was like, how to take pictures,
Yeah,
and,
the-
you know,
the-
walk through the
the
Smithsonian and stuff
photography.
like that. It's, you know,
Exercise programs, how to improve your golf swing.
yeah, like, I mean, it was an awkward launch and everything, but considering what they were doing and there wasn't an established, you know, CD system at the time, I mean, granted, the Turbo CD was out 2 years ahead of time, but it really wasn't established. It wasn't doing anything different. It was just a Turbo Grafx game with Redbook audio. That's
Yep.
all it was.
One last thing with Sega CD, it generally gets shit on like as a big giant failure that made Sega go out of business, like the 32X. The Sega CD wasn't like a runaway hit, but it did stay around and for several years, had over 100 games. It was not that big of a failure. I think Sega pretty much had it priced to where it would not lose the company money.
The Sega
And-
CD set the stage for CD gaming. It
Right.
really did.
It wasn't a success, but it wasn't an abject failure. The
Well,
32X, which we're going to talk about next, well, that was your failure.
It gave you got the lunars out of it. Once it was, so looking at it now, it seems like it was a decent transition point. Once they figured out what to do with it, when they started doing things like Lunar on there, the companies realized that we can do music, we can do voices, and this kind of ushers in that voiceover era where, you know, the Final Fantasy games, no voices, and how long was it before we got voices on them?
Almost
You had Lunar
10 years.
that had your character
Voice
got
acting.
to sing.
And, you know, we talked about before with the TurboGrafx being, you know, the mid-step in generation. I think the Sega CD was the mid-step in generation. It was really what kind of bridged the gap between
that whole
console
generation is that's
cartridge
very
and CD.
odd that because there's a lot of hardware we're not even going to get to that was released. You know, we got our CDIs and our 3DOs and whatnot. But let's go to our next Sega add-on.
Well, hold on, real quick before we leave this
Yeah.
one, Stephen, you were kind of quiet in the Sega CD thing. You have a Sega CD, don't you?
I do. I have Sonic CD. That's probably the only game I play much on it.
What do you think about it? Like, are you as impressed with it as you are with, you know, other things in your collection around the same generation?
No, but I just haven't gotten too many games.
Are you an RPG
for it.
guy?
Yeah.
You have the Lunars, or do you have the
I have
PlayStation?
I have
with the-
PlayStation Lunar.
Oh, okay.
Not a huge fan. But I'm trying to think what else. Panic, which I played a little bit. That's a fun game.
We do not have Panic. We have 4,000 games, so we don't have Panic. We need Panic.
And you mentioned
Panicking.
Sega games with enhanced sound. I love the soundtrack to Echo the Dolphin
Oh, yes.
for that. But again, all these things are not launch titles, so I don't know. I think it does have some good things. I don't have too much because it's hard to find games for it.
Right.
And those
Especially good
cases.
games
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
Had Revengers of Vengeance.
I would like to play that because I love that title. You introduced that to me. Yeah. Oh, Monkey Island, I think is a good version of that.
Out of this world.
Yeah, out of this world. Heart of the Alien. All right, what's next, Chris?
32X.
Stick it in your Genesis.
Oh, I'll stick it in there. All right. I will admit right now, I was one of the people who bought a 32X during my Christmas break in 1994. I was a freshman in college.
You poor thing.
I do not regret it to this day. The way it
regret
was
it for
marketed
you.
as because the idea was that Sony and Sega were releasing next gen systems in 1995, and the cost was going to be $400 plus. This was going to be $159, which in today's money is $246.56. That was going to have new games and extend the life of your Genesis. And I was on board with that. And one of the reasons I was on board with that was a little game called Doom. It was the first console port of Doom. Unless 94
Jaguar?
was Jaguar. But I'm not going to buy a Jaguar. But
Oh, and Doom was also on the Super Nintendo.
until later.
Oh, okay.
And
And it
sucked.
sucks.
And it sucks.
It's like Little, right?
And
Yeah, it was-
Doom is much maligned on the 32X for being incomplete, but it was playable. It was pretty smooth. The letterboxing wasn't as bad as even the 3DO version, believe it or not. Another game I was big into was Virtual Racing Deluxe. I was a big Virtual Racing fan on the Genesis, but at $99 I wasn't going to buy that game, so getting the cheaper version on 32X was cool. Star Wars Arcade was excellent. I would say Sega's answer to Star Fox, really. And then the other launch title, Cosmic Carnage, is a joke. And I love that joke, especially on Classic Gamer. If you ever watch that, it's always the game of the year, even though it's...
So I have a feeling you would give this a pretty good...
I think the launch, it didn't do that bad. It sold okay. The reason it failed is because after the Saturn came out early in 95, 32X was abandoned. So you can only have so many platforms out there, and the launch itself wasn't bad. I'd give it a C. I can see why people give it less, but there is no rating for Sega CD or 32X in this Game Informer article. But I did not regret buying it at launch time, and what it promised was going to be good. It's just that Sega did not deliver games on any platform, mind you. They didn't have any Genesis games, Saturn games, or 32X games in that 95-96 period that were that excellent, oh my god, I have to play this today type thing. It really wasn't. I mean,
so I'd like to bring up one thing when it comes to the Sega Genesis, the Sega CD, and the 32X.
Right.
The fucking power supplies.
Is there 3?
There are 3. So there are 3 individual power supplies, and they are large bricks.
They're bigger than the Nintendo.
Sega sells sold a power adapter that says Sega on it. We have one in the other room. They gave you proper spacing because once upon a time you didn't have that on surge protectors. You didn't have it on power adapters. So when you did it, you got your Genesis in the wall. Then you had to finagle some way to put your 32X in the wall,
upside
and
down
then also
dangling. Yeah.
Well, and you could.
There was so much space around them.
You couldn't put them upside down. There was a big it was a Magoo and then Magoo.
Oh yeah, I used extension cords and all sorts of shit that would have set my place on fire had I not lived in a dorm.
That was a huge design flaw.
It was definitely a design flaw. So
it was fixed in the Neptune, which I would give an F.
Because it never
fails.
But really,
that was that EGM April Fool's joke that they had extra Neptunes there in the warehouse there. So, I thought it was real.
So Star Wars Arcade? Yeah, Star Wars Arcade's sweet. That's a great game.
Doom is sweet for what it is.
Does it have music, the Doom? Does it have music?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, people make fun of it compared to the Super NES version, but that Super NES had that horn again, that wah, 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 which I hate.
I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm not sure if you...
But if you listen to Super NES music, like whenever they try to have like a bass, instead of a bass, it's like this wah, wah, wah
sounds
instrument.
Like Peanuts.
It does. It absolutely sounds like fucking Peanuts. But...
The 32X has so much shit that comes with it.
Yes.
That it's impossible to find one. I don't have one of these yet.
Because you have to have like the connection cable to go between. And if you've got a Genesis 1, then you have to have a connection cable.
Extra connection cable.
Then there's another connection cable that goes onto that. Then you've got like the plates that go on it.
You
and
don't
then
have
you've
to
got
have
the
the
plates.
There's a plastic thing that fits
You're
on the
supposed
Genesis.
They're like
2.
grounding plates.
Yeah,
they
don't do anything. Yeah. They were... But yeah, it's just to find a complete way. You better off just buying it sealed still. I don't think they're that expensive.
Right. Like refinding those guys, it's going to be easier to find one in the box because we used to have them traded in all the time. So what would you grade it? Because it's got
the launch
games?
itself was above average. Like those 4 games, and then
it's more impressive than the Sega CD. Sure.
But it was released at the end of November, so there was only like that 1 month window.
And how much
for Christmas?
How much was it?
$159.
And it came with what?
It came with a rebate if you bought a game. I got my whatever rebate. I forget how much it was. I got a rebate for buying a game with it.
D.
Okay.
No.
Chris, have you ever stacked up as much as you can?
I have not.
Genesis?
I got it on that Baker's rack, so I can't even.
Yeah.
But it's I can see why somebody would say a D as long as you don't give it an F.
No, I'm not going to give it an F. It's just
the launch was successful. The launching of the Saturn is what killed the 32X.
The reason that I'm giving it a D is because the games that came out were very limited and narrow in scope. And I'm really not a Doom fan. I didn't care about Doom. I played Marathon. I was a Mac guy. So, I could have cared less about Doom.
Was Marathon out in 94?
No, I think it was 96.
Okay.
A little bit later. But like I completely skipped over that first earlier than that.
I thought it was earlier than that.
It might have been earlier than that.
Whatever.
It was way earlier than that.
Because there was like Marathon 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, because I played it on my
by next year.
6115 CD. That would have been like
Marathon's
between
a
94 and
gas
95. But yeah, no. So like, I never cared about Doom, and so because of that, there was really nothing else. Like the Sonic game for it, Knuckles Chaotix, was awkward and awful. And
Star Wars Arcade?
I didn't watch Star Wars until a
Which
little
is
while
true.
ago.
Yeah,
So
that was.
Star Wars
Virtua
Arcade
Racing?
was nothing to me. Virtua Racing I didn't care about.
I wasn't
Mortal Kombat
racing.
It
2.
didn't feel the same. And I played my Super Nintendo version. I mean, there was nothing that really, like, I had the Genesis.
There's no killer app. It seemed
It
like
ju-
you
it-
can
it
get
seems-
these. You can get
what-
these items elsewhere, except for
Even-
Cosmic Carnage.
It seems weird that they went from the CD, which was like the future, back to
Yeah.
cartridge. I mean, at the time it did.
And, to be honest, like, I don't know, even as a collector, like now as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I don't know what game I could tell you even stands out on the 32X that I played and said, yeah, this is pretty cool, or yeah, I
Virtua
would have
Fighter's
played
better
this.
than 32X and the Saturn.
I didn't like it. I just, there was nothing about it that I liked. There was nothing redeeming for me. I mean, if it was only for me, or like if Doom didn't come out, I'd probably give it an F. But a lot of people like Doom, and I'm not gonna
Well, how many games
discredit them.
How many games launched for the 32X, and how long did the 32X last?
When it was officially formally discontinued, I think it wasn't until 96, but it was effectively dead as soon as the Saturn came out, which was in May of 95. So they probably finished whatever projects they were working on at that point. But the thing with Sega was there was... Okay, we're going to be done after this?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's a good stopping point anyway, because I think it's PlayStation's next, or Saturn's next. That's the next
Saturn's
one.
next,
Yeah.
it's next
That's a
year.
good stopping point. What was I saying?
It didn't have staying power. It
No,
didn't
no,
really.
it
It
was-
was like it was.
Sega was all about hardware at this point. They had no killer app on any platform in that time frame from 95 or from 94 on. Whatever system they released a killer app for at that point, they could have stayed in the game. Nintendo did Donkey Kong Country. The Super NES stayed alive for another 3 years because of it. Sega had nothing.
We
to
got
answer
Harvest
for
Moon
it.
out of that. Finally.
Right. You got
Chrono
Chrono
Trigger.
Trigger out of it.
Chrono yeah, but not Terranigma.
But that's the thing. I mean, you could have extended the life of any of those platforms had you had one game that made people buy your system. And we just didn't get that in America. Sonic the Hedgehog was dead at that point. It wasn't dead, but I mean, it had worn out as pushing power.
Yeah.
And Sega did not have a comeback to it. In Japan, Virtua Fighter 2 pushed the Saturn to respectability. It didn't over here.
Right.
So, Sega was trying to win the game with hardware, just kind of like companies are doing now with the PlayStation, with your Sony's, Microsofts, trying to out technology each other, and nobody gives a flying fuck. It's always software, just like Becky said in her quote.
Yeah. No.
But-
Yeah.
For the 32X itself, getting a port of Doom was the best they could do, and that made it not a complete failure at that time. It failed next year with the Saturn.
I don't think Becky said the quote yet.
Oh,
On tape.
I will.
Okay.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought she did, but
Previously, in the past, in the future past.
Hmm.
Hold on, because we're going to hear it again. But we knew that we had to have a hot piece of software to launch the product because software sells hardware. That was said by Michael Katz, who was CEO of, he was president or awesome man of lots of video game companies like Sega, Coleco.
He was
Mattel.
head of marketing. He was the one who did the Sega does what Nintendo.
Yeah, he was the one who pushed the Genesis does what Nintendo don't. So, yeah, no.
So what around the table? What do you think?
32X?
Mm-hmm.
D.
D.
It doesn't get an
C.
F because it kept
Hey,
going C.
you know what? You didn't say F, so you're enlightened at least enough to admit that. So I think I won. I won my. I managed to convince people that it wasn't a horrible failure in November.
When you said that the Super Nintendo was a B. So that's good. When you said the Nintendo was an A, what did you say the NES was?
I said with Super Mario Brothers it was an A. Without it, it wasn't.
Okay. All right.
So why do you say C?
Because Doom. I mean, it was a huge game for me.
Yeah.
So
And Doom, Doom was, it was big for everyone. I was definitely like, on the outs, not, being into it at all.
Yeah, I played the hell out of Doom.
So it was a good get.
I had a Doctor Who wad of Doom back in like 95 or whatever. Doctor Who in 95.
So stay tuned. Next time we're going to jump into the 32-bit and the modern eras on our on episode 3. This will be a 3-parter, motherfuckers.
Awesome.
Now you're playing with podcast.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now you're playing with podcast.
Hey listeners, this is Tatton. Just wanted to take a quick moment and let you know that there's lots of great places you can follow Now You're Playing with Podcast. We have a Facebook page set up, which is Now You're Playing with Fan Page. We have a Twitter account set up, which is NYPW Tweets, or Now You're Playing with Tweets. And, of course, all the episodes are available for download from NowYou'rePlayingWith.com. So we hope you enjoy the show. If you like it, please take a moment and send us a message. Let us know what you think about it. And we hope to have some more shows coming for you soon. Until then, thanks for listening.
Now you're playing with podcast.